Hello, I'm the Angry Spork. One more Straczynski crossover of DC heroes before we go on to some other stuff. As with the first of these reviews, it involves the world's most pointy-eared detective, this time crossing paths with someone even more obscure than Dial H for Hero, a hippie mannequin. You heard me. In 1968, Joe Simon created Brother Power the Geek, who was an inanimate object dressed in some clothes by a pair of hippies that were hiding out in an abandoned store. The dummy was struck by lightning and came to life with powers like super strength, absorbing electricity, changing his size, and possessing artificial objects that resemble human beings. Frosty the Snowman, eat your heart out. He wasn't opposed to getting into fights when the need arose, in particular a biker gang that had attacked his hippie friends. The idea was based on wanting, quote, a wandering outcast philosopher akin to the Silver Surfer, who'd become popular with college students, and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, so of course there'd be that theme of people misunderstanding him, such as then Governor of California, Ronald Reagan.
I do solemnly swear that as your president, I will goof off and eat candy.
But the Gipper wasn't the geek's only detractor. Superman editor of the time, Mort Weisinger, didn't like the book, even petitioning that it get shut down. He disliked the hippie subculture in general, which some viewed as heavy with drugs and alcohol abuse, though none of that appears in the original book. Mort also thought they were portrayed too sympathetically. The title was short-lived, cancelled after the second issue, ending with Brother Power being shot into space, and Joe Simon never discussing what the third issue might have been like. The Geek would later return to Earth a couple decades later, some retcons as Crisis on Infinite Earths, but he never became very prominent, appearing mostly in cameos or Easter eggs across DC media. Don't worry, none of this will be on the test. I'm taking issue with The Brave and the Bold, number 29, so let's see if this comic makes us want to just be chill, man, or totally sell out. The cover is really good, featuring bats in the background, his crusading cape caught in the wind, in the rubble of a destroyed building, with his co-star in a lamenting pose, hands dropped down, bearing a look of frustration as his hair flails. Bruce just told him about Jimi Hendrix, and Bro is not taking it well. We begin with a flashback, Wayne narrating how his dad would sometimes let him stay up so they could watch monster movies. While Martha disapproved, Thomas thought it was good to confront fear when there's no actual risk involved. A kind of rehearsal for when you face genuine danger, and you'll know what to do when you're actually afraid. You know, like an alternate universe version of me becoming a murderous vigilante, and then coming to this world to torture young Bruce to make him happy somehow. Yeah, that reasoning sounds more bonkers to me the more I think about it. Watching a movie, even if you know it's all prosthetic makeup and special effects, is still a spectator role. It can affect you in some capacity, but doesn't necessarily inform you what to do in the unscripted real world, where you're a participant. Dr. Wayne.
Are you a real doctor or a doctor like Dr. Pepper's a doctor?
Case in point, that fateful scene in Crime Alley we've been treated to a million times. Anywho, Bruce's favorites were the Frankenstein movies, about an idealist creating a surrogate son to bring the world hope, only for it to become a monster instead. Wait. I'm sorry, I haven't read the story nor watched the old movies, but didn't it also involve the living kit-bashed corpse being more gentle and intelligent than people assumed? That he was the subject of undeserved prejudice? I thought Bruce was smart. Is it me? Am I just going insane? Don't answer that. I suppose this is meant to relate to our hero here, since he also says the monster was a thing of darkness and fear, like a certain someone we know. Apparently the writers of those films had a game they'd play, where each one would write endings that seemed so absolute there was no way to bring the monster back for a sequel. Drop him in a frozen river, explode him, set him on fire, making the next writer scramble with the difficult task of somehow bringing him back. While not easy, they always did find a way of resurrecting him somehow. And here I thought comics had the monopoly on retconning character deaths. Bruce opines that the monster came back because that's what creatures of their time do. They always come back. Guess that also explains the rebooting of 30-year-old sitcoms and sequels to movies from the 1980s with the original surviving actors. This is where our other star makes his entrance, emerging from the rubble of a destroyed toy shop, apparently owned by one of his old friends. Bats narrates how years of rain, sun, chemicals, Bob Dylan music, and that lightning bolt brought the tailor's dummy to life. Though it is mentioned he might also be an elemental force, a kind of living zeitgeist of his era, given physical form. The kids of that age called him, get this, Brother Power, the Geek. What can I say? It was the 60s. What silly names they used. Now to drive my Batmobile back to the Batcave, see if I have any Bat messages on my Bat answering machine, and check on my Bat ficus. People had called the police about a figure shambling out of the rubble, and when Batman got wind of it, he recognized the description from a file he has on the Geek, because he has a file on just about everything. He approaches the dummy, who starts mumbling popular phrases and nomenclature before more lucidly asking what year it is, that being 2009. His dated expressions continue, seeming to remember his friend Cindy hiding him, something about a fire, then waking up tonight. Geek hadn't actually done anything warranting arrest, and Pointy Ears wasn't about to take him to the cave. Why not? Your first sidekick let in Harper Row and a cheap clone of Cassandra Cain. Seems an actual dummy from the 1960s that recycles old catchphrases more than makes the list. He informs he can check in on it in a few days, so should keep out of trouble. Bro is fine with that as the detective swings away. Another flashback, this time from the Geek, recalling hanging out with his friends Brother Paul and Brother Chris, the two who found and named him, and how one day they were warned there may be some trouble later that night, heat coming to shake everyone down, but with BP on patrol, they weren't afraid. A memory he recalls fondly while looking like an aging actor whose plastic surgery backfired big time. While Bro wanders modern Gotham with a lot fewer trees than he remembers, Bats was busy taking out violent crooks, not checking in as often as he intended, so he told himself. Actually, there was something about the dummy that bothered him, something he couldn't identify, getting angry for no clear reason every time he thought about him. It. He then recalls a conversation his parents had one movie night about a friend of his mom's trying to get back together with her husband, boyfriend, it's never specified. For some reason, he yelled at her, so confusingly angry despite allegedly being in love. Thomas offers some more sagely wisdom that loving someone puts us at risk, and if it doesn't work out, we can feel stupid, foolish to have believed in taking a chance on someone. We get mad, not at them, but at ourselves in our disappointment, as love seems to distort into something terrible, causing us to rage at the mirror. Which may be true, but we're not given a lot on why this Carla and Frank couple were having problems. For all we know, he was some pompous, selfish nozzle who makes it everyone else's problem that he thinks the world's out to get him, and she could have had an addiction to buying overpriced porcelain badgers. I'm not saying his words couldn't apply to real life. He does preface his speechifying with how it happens sometimes, but still feels oversimplified. He does add that it's easier for someone to get mad than admit the possibility that they're in the wrong, which is so painfully true nowadays, I may need to grab some aspirin. Finally deciding to stop calling Geek it and going with he, Bruce narrates how Hippie Stein decided to go back to helping those in need. Sometimes people were so creeped out by him that they ran off, but he did manage some good, like knocking the snot out of some thugs that were preying on a woman and saving Bats the trouble. After all, he gets so focused on bigger crimes by his rogues gallery, he can overlook the day-to-day stuff. He recalls how the shop Brother Power awoke from had been closed for years, management refusing to sell in hopes things would turn around, though it just suddenly burned down recently. I told you he didn't take Jimi Hendrix's death very well. Looking into it, Batman discovered there had been numerous unexplained fires in the 4-block area of Cindy's toy store. All affected properties were owned by people who didn't want to sell to a company that planned to build a shopping mall in those very blocks.
Oh, how convenient.
With only 3 stable buildings left in the area, the Dark Knight sets each of them up with heat sensors to alert him if any fires get started, as well as take pictures of the perpetrators. As he takes off from one of these sites, a homeless couple head inside, uncertain of why the vigilante was there, probably not looking for them, so putting it out of their minds, as one prepares to make dinner and the other plays with their infant son. Uh-oh. Depending on how dark JMS wants to go here, Batman might have a new sidekick by the end of this. Bro Power gets himself some new clothes from a donation bin, which conveniently also had a makeup kit, so he can make himself look more human, much like his friend Cindy had done in the past when she worked at a free clinic. He recalls one such touch-up while the clinic was treating some protesters who had gotten beaten for hanging up flyers for an anti-war rally. Then they get the news of Bobby Kennedy's assassination, which dashed their hopes that he would become president and put an end to America's involvement in Vietnam. It makes Brother Paul reconsider their nonviolent stance, saying Kennedy and MLK were wrong, and they have to start fighting back. Eventually, that's just what happens. Civil unrest breaks out, at least one shop is on fire, and the people are indeed fighting back. Paul and Chris are hiding in an alley, both a bit injured, when Brother Power approaches, saying that it wasn't Kennedy or Martin Luther King Jr. who were wrong. Paul was wrong for choosing violence, that he's not just burning buildings, but what he believes in, and the geek doesn't think anything pretty will grow from those ashes.
So you're gonna what? Walk away?
I'm not walking away. You are.
But you're literally walking away while saying that, so you're both being rude and confusing.
Not sure where Bro got that blood on his shirt. Maybe from helping injured people? Whatever the case, he's snapped back to the present to an active fire in a nearby building. Bats' equipment alerts him in the cave, giving him the address and providing video of the arsonist, as well as the destitute parents who've been bound and gagged by the perpetrator. At the sight of the blaze, firefighters are keeping onlookers at bay, saying no one gets in but them. Then one onlooker asks about the figure on the fire escape. Bro Power, who busts through the window.
Come on, he got to leap into a burning building with no protective gear. Why can't we? Not fair, not fair.
Batman arrives and follows suit, barging in with complete disregard to orders otherwise, the firefighter claiming nobody is in there. Not a great look that a trained civil servant, who I think is supposed to make sure of this kind of thing, is making the same mistake as Lex Luthor's Guardian bots from Superman for All Seasons. Inside, Pony Ears encounters the geek, who says he's finally awake, but everyone else has fallen asleep, man, forgetting what it meant. Poetry and talking about improving the world replaced with alcoholic excess, being able to hitchhike or pick up a hitchhiker without fear of suspicion. Now motorists ignoring accident victims in need of help. People talking to each other face to face, replaced with faces stuck in digital personal devices. The hippie version of kids these days. Though unlike some people pining for yesteryear, Geek acknowledges this isn't his time, and maybe it never will be. But it's still sad that it's over as the flames eat at him. Bats unties the parents who tell him about their son down the hall, which is on fire. It's really not looking good until Brother Power walks out, saying maybe it's not over for some, carrying little Ben out, who's not so much as singed, even though the hippie is more fire than mannequin at this point. He hands the kid to Bats, telling everyone to have a nice day, and the vigilante gets the family out in the nick of time. It took less than an hour to find the arsonist responsible, and an hour after that, he gave over evidence against the ones who hired him. The next morning, Pony Ears checked the debris to find no trace of the geek, which for him not to find a trace is saying something because...
I'm Batman.
He doesn't think the strange being is dead no more than Frankenstein's creation in those old movies. Sure enough, the living doll is in the sewers, and given there's any of him left, I imagine his body has fire-resistant material. While he takes a siesta, Batman figures he'll return, as beings like him always do, because he has something to tell the world, to remind them of something necessary, even if some try to ignore it. Inside, a monstrous-looking figure is a gentleness waiting to be reborn, and the comic ends on Batman finding that a strangely comforting thought. That was Brave and the Bold, number 29, and it was a fine story, though perhaps with more mixed messaging than the previous two. I covered Thomas Wayne's rather generalized views on relationships. Again, he's not entirely wrong, just that we need to assume it applies to the couple in question, and omits the existence of red flags, but then you have Geek's friends dusting it up with the authorities. Paul, Chris, and their buds were non-violent. Even the first issue of the original Brother Power comic mentioned their pacifism wasn't exactly for the mannequin, who didn't hesitate to fight back, like smacking a gang of punks with their own motorcycle.
Nice!
Yet he lectures his human pals when they start using force and causing a ruckus. It can seem pretty hypocritical at first glance, especially if you're less familiar with the character than I am. When you think about it, Bro has a point. He made the decision to fight back, but against people actively doing harm in the moment. His friends, however, had committed themselves to nonviolence as an alternative means to effect change in a world they saw had a lot of problems. The assassinations of a politician they had hope in and a civil rights leader, the raging of a war they saw as senseless, activists being slandered and assaulted for wanting the fighting to end. All this made peaceful solutions appear further out of reach. It pushed them over the edge, so they started fighting force with force. BP didn't think it was right for them to abandon their beliefs like that, and if they started the riot, Big if, since outside agitators are a thing. It makes sense that he'd be disappointed in his friends and choose not to bail them out, letting them face the consequences of their actions. It's not that he doesn't care, it's that he expected better of people that helped and accepted him for what he is. That being said, there's an element he may not have accounted for. The logic of an actual dummy may not be entirely sound. Shocking, I know. There's that saying about when peaceful resolution becomes impossible, violent revolution becomes inevitable. Preventing people from speaking out, ignoring civil rights, the powerful using their leverage to attack perceived enemies in violation of the law with no ramifications, can add a lot of pressure to a society or culture that just wants coexistence and fairness. And for anyone that's ever boiled pasta with a lid on, you know that pressure eventually causes stuff to boil over. This is what the geek doesn't seem to consider. People have their limits no matter how well-intentioned they are or how noble their goals. Not an excuse for their actions, but nor is it something that appears from nothing. Christians, such as myself, are told to expect suffering, to offer it to the Lord, try to be better, and love our enemies. But boy, howdy, do we not always meet that challenge. I totally understand the desire to knock a few heads, with not much stopping me from visiting certain people on my mental list of malcontents, except wanting to avoid prison and not liking to travel. Oh, and your eternal wisdom too, of course. Maybe if the geek had offered some alternative that got rejected, his turning away from them would make more sense, help clarify what may feel like a betrayal between these characters. Because from Bro's perspective, his friends expecting him to join in on command and retake their arrested cohorts could be pretty insulting, like they suddenly see Geek less like the person they had treated him as, and more a tool for their use. This isn't to say the story is bad, though. It's a figure from a bygone era lamenting the decline of connections and trust in society. Not just that the mannequin speaks like a hippie version of Bumblebee from the Bayformer movies, but how it seemed there was less fear of the stranger, more discussions to help everyone, more willingness to contribute to a greater good. I doubt it was really that idyllic in the 60s, but the magical doll man doesn't seem entirely wrong. JMS also attempts, with subtlety, a parallel between the two stars, with Frankenstein's monster added for comparison, that a new life meant for something good ended up seen by many as something much darker, alluding to Bruce's life turning out as it has. Which isn't so bad in concept, I just don't know if it's well supported in the story. Yeah, maybe his unexplained anger at the mere thought of the geek was based on the loose similarities they shared, and maybe he internally felt bad about not wanting to take him back to the cave, though the dummy could have politely declined. But this feels rather tenuous to me, since unlike the hippie, Batman purposefully decided to become an object of fear to the criminal underworld, and he really doesn't do anything to justify the implied parallel to Frankenstein's creation. But Brother Powers shows him that even something monstrous or scary-looking can be much kinder underneath, not quite as horrific as first glance might suggest. So Bruce's comfort at the end is likely him feeling like there's hope for him yet, which I do think works. The art is still consistently good, no complaints, though nothing standing out too much, aside from the nicely done flame effects, and how, even with makeup on, the geek looks a little off to totally pass as human, a visual cue that he's an outsider no matter what. Besides that, I at first thought that Bats using "get this" felt unusually casual and amiable for him, but the more I thought about it, I could hear him saying it given the right tone and context, though him referring to his metaphors as nut bars felt less like him, more like Gumball Watterson. Even with some curious choices, this story is still one that makes you think, while not trying to go too far over your head. We're going to break off from this run for a spell, and next week we'll see us return to our favorite Azure acrobat, Kurt Wagner, and the writing of Chuck Austin. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.